So good afternoon and welcome everyone, and sorry first for the long delay. I'm Narayan Liu, acting president of Befria Hongkong here in Sweden. You'll see I'm joined by groups from all over the world. We have Finn Lau with us. We have Sweden's liberal youth groups, Simona, Mohamsson. We have the representative from the Hong Kong committee in Norway, Jessica Chiu, and representatives from both Støt Hong Kong and Netherlands for Hong Kong. As part of this year's 612 global event commemorating the Hong Kong Revolution, we'll be discussing how the movement has changed over the past 2 years, how far we've come and how far we as a movement still need to go. So let's start a bit broadly. When you think about Hong Kong and the pro-democratic movement, what is it you are fighting for? What kind of a change do you want to see? Here have built connections over the past 2 years with journalists and politicians, with academics, anyone and everyone who might want to help make a difference. Here in Sweden, we were lucky to have had people willing to reach out or to work with us to ensure the right discussions were being had, or at the very least, they helped us raise awareness. I suppose to start, I'll ask, how easy or how difficult has it been to find support over the past 2 years? To you.
Thank you so much. I would like to start off by saying that many of you Hong Kongers are the reason why people actually get inspired to do and get engaged. Just the knowledge of doing something small makes a big difference. Usually I would say that a big argument that we can use is that Hong Kong is a window of what China wants to be and what China wants to do, not only in their close reach, but also in our own democracy. So I would sometimes, when I talk to Swedes, tell them that if you don't feel the need of showing solidarity for other people, maybe you can be afraid for your own democracy and your own security in your own countries, because what Hong Kong heroes and democratic freedom fighters are doing are not just taking a stand and taking a fight for their own liberty and for their own freedom, but they are doing something for the big, broad democratic movement of the world. And that's what I'm very hopeful for. And that's what I think also makes it easier for people to engage, because they see themselves in many of you freedom fighters. Some of them are here right now, and I think many people can see themselves as these heroes, having the same dreams or having families that look the same and such as that. Thank you.
Thank you. Finn, how about you?
Finn, your mic.
Well, yeah, thanks to those protesters in Hong Kong, no matter what they are, peaceful or violent, because thanks to their action, 1 million march, 2 million march, different kinds of protests and rallies in Hong Kong, Hong Kong has been the spotlight of the international media. And because of their action, or because of their collective action by Hong Kongers, more and more politicians or parliamentarians getting attended at the Hong Kong situation. And because of that, at the very beginning, it was so difficult, to be honest. But luckily, thanks to the number of participants, thanks to the G20 global newspaper advertisement, the Hong Kong issue has become an international issue. And then we witnessed some changes in the international politics from the 1980s engagement policy by the US. The international community gradually switching to another direction. They are more and more of them are adopting a tough China policy. Are we live streaming right now? Is it?
Yes,
we lost?
yeah,
No,
right. It's just my
okay.
connection had to switch.
Yeah. So so thanks, and yeah, because of the change in the engagement policy, we do see hope. In many countries like the US, we have seen the enactment of the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. We also see the BNO LIFO scheme and other policy in other countries, including sanctions against those Hong Kong government officials and China officials. So we do see changes in the political scene, and yeah, so this is the situation. And I do think that perhaps in the future we could see more and more sanctions, not just Magnitsky style sanction, but maybe strong collective economic sanction against China. After that, the CCP economic resources may be drained and Hong Kong may be free.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Jessica?
Yes, maybe I can tell a bit about our group and more from the Norwegian perspective. Our group established in August 2019, so it's roughly 2 years ago. And we did not actually expect anything. But so far, every media report, discussion or resolution statements, or individuals' attention on the fight in Hong Kong has been a valuable support for us. And regarding Norway, Hong Kong level, it's little of interest for most of people. But when you talk to the general public, they show general support to us and sympathy. But we also understand that most of them has little knowledge about Hong Kong and the background of the movement. But regarding Norway-China relationship, then we get much more attention. So we are very thankful that in Norway there are established groups supporting Uyghurs and Tibets and Taiwan, and it's good to collaborate with them. And the more we are, the stronger we are. And regarding parliamentarians level, there are a few representatives from different parties that have been very supportive to us. For example, Guri from the Liberal Party has nominated Hong Kongers to get the Nobel Peace Prize in 2019. And just last year, there are also nominees for Martin Lee and Hong Kong Free Press by several representatives from the parties. But we also find it difficult to engage some parties in Norway to even have a dialogue. And, you know, in September, there will be a new election for the parliament in Norway. The situation may change, but we hope to see a positive change. Regarding the Norwegian government level, they have issued statements showing concerns about the Hong Kong situation. They use very relatively weak words, showing worries, no strong words at all. And we actually didn't see them voicing out for the overhaul of electoral reform for Hong Kong yet. But one note to want to raise about is the formation of IPAC, the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China. It has been very helpful to coordinate like actions or statements from different countries. And we get very useful contacts via Simona, and we hope to work with them in the future. Thanks.
And Denmark?
Hi, I'm Dawn from Støt, Hong Kong, Denmark. Yeah, so I think following Jessica's line, I will just introduce ourselves like a little bit as how Støt Hong Kong was formed, or how we started engaging ourselves into this whole thing. So I think in 2019, just a few of us from Hong Kong living in Denmark, we just found it necessary to to spread a word or raise awareness in the Danish society of what is going on in Hong Kong. So we set up a Facebook page. Initially, we were just sharing news from Hong Kong, like what was going on, and then gradually we started hosting events, screenings, holding conferences in the Danish Parliament, and inviting different people to come and speak to us. So I think that slowly grew, and so we are where we are today. And in terms of support, how easy it has been for us the past 2 years, I think in Denmark we've been quite lucky in the sense that since the very beginning of the movement, there's one parliament member, Uffe Elbæk, who he's very, very supportive of the Hong Kong people, and a few more now in the parliament are showing concerns, and they have been willing to speak up from time to time. So, for example, we have 2 MPs in IPAC, and for the last 2 times Ted Hui came to Denmark, he was also received by multiple MPs. And then on the local level, Amnesty International Denmark and their sub-branches are very engaged in raising awareness about human rights in Hong Kong. And then the renowned Danish artist Jens Gaucho, the person who made the Pillar of Shame, he's also very keen on making noises through different artworks. And then there's also the Dansk Kina Kritiks Selskab, which is Danish China criticism society. They focus more on China-related issues, and there are also other NGOs that offer help when we hold events. And so I think in that sense, we're quite lucky. We have kind of a different array of people or groups that we can alliance ourselves with. But the more difficult part would be to seek media attention, especially now that the movement within Hong Kong is silenced to a large extent. Most of the time, it is hard to get Danish media to report on Hong Kong when we approach them. So now we kind of have to wait for journalists to reach out most of the time.
And finally, the Netherlands.
Hi. So a little bit about our group again. Netherlands, Hong Kong. We very similar to others that we actually mainly started as a organizer group for support rallies in the Netherlands, and trying to raise awareness of what is happening in Hong Kong. And actually, Facebook page existed since 2014 during the umbrella movement, but basically didn't restart it until 2019 when there are the big protests happening in June 2 years ago. So we really started as trying to just try to echo what is happening in Hong Kong, so that bring people into attention. And only towards later during the protest that we realized also maybe it's really important to start engaging politicians and NGOs, and in that sense we are also quite lucky that we got support from, for example, Amnesty International, that we approached each other, and we actually also jointly organized, for example, a film screening and seminar together. Also got approached as the let's say Facebook page got more attention, that also got approached by like student groups that organize seminars and so on. So there is a certain degree of engagement, and we are, I would say that we're still relatively young in terms of trying to reach out into the politics side, and that it has been quite difficult on our side to actually get the attention. I mean, one of the person that we managed to contact, which actually probably Simona is a member of the the IPAC, so Martijn van Helvoet, but unfortunately, in the recent election, he didn't get really elected. So we will need to see how it is going to engage. And actually, we're still looking at how the coalition government is going to form in the Netherlands after the recent election, and how the scene would change. Well, the lucky part is also, again, the local groups. So throughout the movement, gently, I think also not only Hong Kong groups, and also the more like long established groups from Tibet and then Uyghurs, we're slowly getting more and more together and communicating and trying to organize things together. So that is, in terms of support, that is a very nice development, I would say, actually, in the past year or so. And media attention, again, is also, I echo with what happens in Denmark, is that it is really hard for us to actually get much media attention. So we try to do as much as possible. So by using something more like a stunt, you would say, for example, that we have an action that was trying to ask Amsterdam to break their sister city or tied with Beijing, and that also caught up a little bit. But otherwise, in general, it is not very easy to get the media to report events here that the Netherlands also is trying to support. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. And yeah, so just looking back at the earlier days of the entire movement, Finn, you popularized Lam Chau, or the Phoenixism doctrine. You founded Hong Kong Liberty and Stand with Hong Kong, and you've been working with activist groups around the world. So, you know, comparing it to when it really sort of started exploding, how do you see the movement's progression at this point as a whole?
This is a big question, because and I just realized that I didn't mention I'm one of the activists in exile wanted under the Hong Kong national security law, and it's because of my activism, my doctrine of Lam Chau, of Phoenixism. So right now, so in May 2020, right before the enactment of the Hong Kong national security law, there was the last round of public survey by the Citizens Press Conference. So there were around 370 correspondents to that survey, and there was one of the question asking the people how, to what extent you are supporting the doctrine of Lam Chau, something like that. With 5 marks at the full mark, 4.2 mark is the average score to that question. So we could see that there has been a popular support towards the doctrine of Lam Chau, or Phoenixism, in Hong Kong. So what is Phoenixism? Basically, to those maybe the first time to heard this term, it could be literally translated as if we burn, you burn with us. So we stands for Hong Kongers, and you stands for the CCP, or Beijing. So since the 1960s, or maybe to be precise, 1967, Hong Kong has been burning by the CCP. And you can see that, especially after 1997 handover, Hong Kong's academic freedom, freedom of the press, the assembly, etc., has all gone, especially after 2019. So in that sense, I could say that Hong Kongers are still pursuing the doctrine of Lam Chau, or such strategy. We are still calling for sanction against Hong Kong government officials and China officials, and maybe perhaps more than that, we are asking for urging or advocating for economic sanction. So in terms of the status, in 2019, we got, maybe in 2019 or before the enactment of the national security law, Hong Kong is the virtual leader of the whole movement. Although we call it leaderless, but Hong Kong is the virtual leader. But after the enactment of the security law, we have lost such a virtual leader, because it's so difficult to mobilize or organize activities in Hong Kong. So in the past if the people around the globe, Hong Kongers around the globe, may try to echo with those activities held by local Hong Kongers in Hong Kong, but we could see that it's very difficult to follow the same pattern, to use the same tactics. So recently, we try to, and many one of us are trying to adopt another approach. We try to have some sort of coordination among us in different countries, and that's why we got the Hong Kong Be Water 2021 campaign. And this is another way out, because I think it combined the advantages of having a so-called big stage and the advantages of leaderless. I don't know how to describe this kind of new cooperation or collaboration mode, perhaps something like a leading coordination, something like that. But I think this may be the way out, because it doesn't rely on, it could be different people or different teams to be the leading coordinator every time for each campaign. After the completion of each campaign, every team's organization could just go back to their original role and try to be leaderless again. Whenever we need to come together, we try to group together and have something like leading coordination again. So this may be the way out.
Simona, you've been following the events in Hong Kong quite closely. In fact, you're publishing a book, which you mentioned, Hong Kong-grupper, which comes out at the end of the month. So how would you describe the perception or awareness of the situation in Hong Kong and its significance here in Sweden or Europe?
I think, as Finn has talked about, there is something very unique that is very different from what we in the democratic or Western world are used to when it comes to movements, that you don't have one leader or one figure that everything is around. And it shows also the Hong Kong movement that it doesn't depend on what you have in your what kind of money you have or which part of society you are in. It's something that is bigger than just one group of people or one interest, and that is something that we really can use and inspire from. But I would also say that the creativity that is in the movement, using popular cultural references that we know from different generations, is something that is very, very unique. And I think that we see parts of this mentality that Finn is talking about, the Be Water mentality, also now in Belarus. We have seen it in Ukraine. So I think that what Hong Kong and Hong Kongers are doing is something very special, and that it will inspire more democratic movements to use the same idea of how to structure and organize a movement.
And right, so when the movement began, it adhered to several principles, some of which we've touched on, stemming from the tactics that were employed on the ground. It was leaderless, it was flexible, and it was cohesive. Do you feel, and I'd like to hear from everyone on this, do you feel that those principles continue to guide the movement globally, or has it changed? And Simona, let's start with you.
Yeah. I think that, and please let me know if I'm overstepping, but I think many Hong Kongers right now are being challenged with the question either to stay and risk their lives, or to leave and risk being alone in exile. And that complicates the movement a lot, and makes it needing some front figures to show the loneliness of being abroad, living in exile, or the strength it needs to be still left in Hong Kong. So I think that, of course, there are front people like Finn, like Jessica, like some of you here that need to be the face out. So it's not totally leaderless, and it needs to be like that, or else how can people like me feel that we can be engaged and feel like we are we can see ourselves in different leaders? I think that it's needed.
And Finn, you're quite you're one of those prominent figures. How do you? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, because I don't want to talk too much. That's why I was waiting for other people from Netherlands or Norway to speak. I think it's so important to maintain the cohesion or unity between different protesters, no matter whether they are located in Hong Kong, the city itself, or in other countries, as well as we have to resolve the differences between the peaceful and violent protesters. And I have seen another kind of conflicts between the so-called local fronts and the international fronts. But I do think that we could reconcile those differences. And again, the Hong Kong Be Water 2021 campaign is one of the maybe an attempt to resolve those differences, to reconcile those differences. And to be precise, I do think that perhaps the term local fronts or international fronts may be outdated or fade away, because I do see that there are lots of rooms of improvement or for development in the so-called international front. I would see that the boundary between the two fronts would be more and more blurry, because, for example, 2 to 3 weeks ago, I attended one of the academic conferences by the Hong Kong Studies Association, in which there was a professor trying to talk about how the Japanese movies or Korean movies could be exported to the world, how they were nominated by Oscar and other aspects. So to use the movie as an example, if we want to boost or to help those developments, or maybe to export Hong Kong movies to the world market, instead of maybe try to broaden their income sources for the local Hong Kong movie industry, perhaps we should make reference to other experience by the Japanese and Korean to set up something like a movie association, something like that in UK, in US, or in other countries, to promote the Hong Kong movies in the international community. So in that sense, I couldn't categorize whether this is so-called international front or local front, and the same could be applied to commodities or goods manufactured or made in Hong Kong. So this is the trend that I foresee, or maybe I try to predict. Yeah, in my 2 cents.
I see the Netherlands. You want to add?
Yeah, so I would comment on the leaderless and what you said, like the do not split mentality that guided the movement. And I think this is, well, so just a comment that is definitely sprout from let's say the trauma from the umbrella movement in 2014, where frontliners, more aggressive frontliners and peaceful protesters disagree with each other's tactic and become one of the driving force in the downfall of the movement. And later on, especially 2019, and that it becomes one of the guiding principles that we should be leaderless, and we should be very tolerant of each other's actions, and so that it become that everybody can. That means that the movement itself is very grassroots, which I think is definitely true. That I think none of us here has met before we actually organize these things, and we're like self-motivated, and everybody believed that they contribute to the overall cause in their own way, and thus that people don't need to be shy from contributing. What I do think is that we are still on the pathway of evolving, because in some sense I think we might have taken it too far. Just to make it clear, like to be leaderless means that no one is actually the boss, so you're not really exactly follow somebody's lead in a way that, oh, you need to obey a certain person, and that makes the movement very fluid, that even if, well, there's no target that you can just assassinate a leader, then the whole thing disappears. So that is very safe, but that doesn't mean that we do not communicate with each other and try to coordinate with each other's action. And And I hope everybody here is agreed. That's one of the reasons why we're all here today, and also some of the actions that our group with the other Scandinavian groups have been organizing is these newsletters, for example, that we're putting up every roughly once a month earlier. That we are kind of as a whole movement. I think Hong Kongers are learning the way to coordinate in a more democratic way, even within the movement, and that's something we didn't have a lot of chance to actually learn also when we were in Hong Kong, for example. So definitely it's going to change. I think it needs to change because we do need to make sure that we have a common course of action, or at least it should reinforce each other, but not just doing things totally independently.
And Dawn?
Yes, I think there are different things I agree and disagree from the different people that have spoken on this. I think definitely, yeah, the leaderless element is one of the most important thing that has helped the movement to carry on, because if we look at what's going on in Hong Kong now, if we had key figures, I mean, the key figures in Hong Kong, they're basically all in prison now. So if we only, if the whole time we had only been putting our hopes on leaders or faces, then we are doomed. So I think even today, yeah, as Netherlands has suggested, the reason why we would be here today, the few of us from Hong Kong, but we would be gathered here today speaking on behalf of a certain country, it's because, yeah, we are not big names, maybe Finn is, but most of us, we are just normal Hong Kongers, and it's because, yeah, we understand that we can't just leave this responsibility or this burden to bigger names. Each of us has a role to play in this movement. So yeah, I think for sure, yeah, there are more famous activists like Nathan Law or Ted Hui and so on. But I think most local groups, they are still very much self-initiated, and they have a lot of freedom to choose who and when and what to collaborate with. And I think in Denmark, in our case, yeah, as I said, we have a Facebook page that is kind of the main channel of where things happen. But in essence, there are also other individuals that take initiatives on their own without being tied to the Copenhagen area, or they are not tied to the Facebook page per se. So in a sense, the movement here, I think it's still it's still very leaderless and flexible. Everyone takes up a different role and does what they're best at. But I think also, as what Netherlands has suggested, we're also at a stage of brainstorming. I guess the whole movement, everyone is constantly brainstorming and evolving, because things just happen so quickly, and we just all have to evolve and think how to go further. So we also have been brainstorming and exploring other ideas or possibilities of say to establish a more organized structure or organization or local so to really set up something with more roots per se in the local ground, so that maybe hopefully it will give us more flexibility and even more exposure even. So but yeah, we are very much still hoping we are adhering to the principle of being a leaderless movement.
And I see Jessica wants to speak.
Yeah, I want to add a point. I think we're still adhering to the leaderless, flexible, and cohesive principle. But one thing that's important, that we are not a big stage or leader for Norway, but we are the contact points for others. And also we try to share the context to the others. That could be helpful for the whole movement, and also an international collaboration. And in Norway, there's unfortunately for all the NGOs, registered NGOs, you have to put the names in the board. But I see that many overseas groups have been very successful, even going anonymous. That is very good.
Actually, Jessica, I wanted to ask, because the last time we spoke about what this year would entail at the beginning, you seemed quite positive that Norway was becoming more aware of the dangers of close ties with the Chinese government. Has, we're at the midpoint now of 2021. Has Norway, in your view, taken any steps to encourage or change that view?
Yeah, last time I think I was referring to a policy institute in Norway who issued a survey to interview Norwegian people or people in Norway about their views for close ties with the Chinese government. And in the past years, we still see that Norway has been very, very cautious about being vocal or criticize China publicly. And one example is that Norway followed EU on targeted sanction on those who violate human rights. Some of them are Chinese officials. They just issue 2 sentences or even 1 sentence on the webpage and then ask people to read more about the whole resolution. It was done so quietly that we didn't even know until the media talked about it. But in the general public level, people are generally aware that China is the major power. But it seems like the same policy institute for foreign affairs tends not to build a very threatening picture of the Chinese government within Norway. In a sense, it can make sense because like Chinese culture or collaboration with Chinese business has been integrated to our society. But compared to like Russia, the picture is more threatening because Russia is also geographically closer to Norway than China. And well, Norway got the place in the Security Council for UN this year, but we still haven't seen, we haven't been aware of anything that Norway has taken up in the Security Council regarding human rights abuses in China. So we are still following what's going on there. And recently, because of the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics, we see emerging debates about the approach for the Olympic Games. This is something we are working on, and we are happy to see there are more debates or discussions on this topic. So one example that we taken from was the initiative that several football clubs in Norway actually urged for boycott of the World Cup in Qatar. So we'll try to see whether there will be similar actions in Norway by the athletes joining the Winter Olympics. So perhaps if it's also a way of sharing contacts in this group here, if you know any athletes that share the view of having actions against the Olympic Games, then maybe we can talk with each other, or maybe we can ask those athletes to talk to the Norwegian athletes to share their point of view. Thanks.
Yeah, on that point, we've actually, here in Sweden, we've been trying to find ways to reach out to retired athletes, just because we know that the active ones, they have their careers to think about, so they might be a bit discouraged. But I was thinking retired athletes all over the world, they, they're still held in quite high regard. Yeah, those voices are very necessary, so that's fantastic actions. Dawn, I'm curious about what Denmark, I know you touched on it a little bit, but what do you think of the approach that Denmark takes to the Chinese government?
I think, yeah, Denmark, we probably have a closer relationship with China than any other Nordic countries, unfortunately, due to the comprehensive strategic partnership that started back in 2008. However, there have been more and more political critics in recent years that call for a review on this partnership due to the human rights abuses in China. So, for instance, as China is now reviewing the draft of the 5-year joint work program from the Danish government, people are asking the authorities to disclose the draft so that there would be more space for a democratic debate. And the foreign minister has also been advocating to put liberal values before trade, and therefore been heavily criticized in the news that he's not taking a strong enough stance against human rights violations by the CCP. And despite warnings from the Chinese embassy, the foreign minister attended the Copenhagen Democracy Summit in May, where the Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen and Nathan Law were present. His speech at the summit was nonetheless shorter than 2 minutes and contained no substance. And besides steps taken by the Danish government, some incidents like the Chinese corona flag published by a Danish newspaper, and then the Copenhagen Zoo removing Taiwan from its map, Tibetan flags confiscated by the police, the Pillar of Shame sculpture displayed right outside the Danish parliament, and also Danish politicians helping Tet Hui flee Hong Kong. These all have revealed intervention from the Chinese embassy. So I think these are moments when Danes would really feel the threats from China more directly, because they just do not like to be interfered with their rights.
And how about in the Netherlands?
Yeah, so the Netherlands also is the government of Netherlands is in a way, I would say, very conservative about this, that they're trying to be not extremely vocal, especially the foreign minister. So actually, just a few days after the big protest in Hong Kong in 2019, he was revealed to be visiting China, and and was meeting with the foreign minister in China, in Beijing, and afterwards in his speech he has almost no mentioning, no mentioning of the issue of Hong Kong while the big protest just happened, and only when actually Dutch media during this press conference asked about it, then he said, "Oh yeah, we did talk about it," without actually mentioning what their stance on these things is. And so far, the stance from let's say the public face of the Dutch government has been relatively mellow on the issue of China. There is, however, a lot of voices in the more parliament level, and as well as also in the general public. Actually, a recent survey in 2020 on the Dutch population, that 83% agree that Chinese is reprehensive because violate human rights and privacy of population, and 46% agreed that China is a threat to the security of Europe. And also on the government commissioned study through Leiden University about possible threats of infiltration or Chinese influence in the Netherlands, that the professor Frank Pieker concluded that although there's no clear direct influence at this moment, that it is important that the Dutch government actually step up and make a concrete warning system to avoid the Chinese authorities using Chinese diaspora communities in the Netherlands as a spread of their own propaganda and try to infiltrate and exert its influence at witness in Australia and Germany, and the actual potential for this interference is present. So there is getting more and more aware, but the government itself is not very active on it. And for example, also the Confucius Institute in Groningen, that they just warn the university that there's a potential for infiltration and propaganda stemming out from them, but they claim because of academic freedom, they cannot really force them to, of course, do anything about it. We'll yet need to see, partly because the largest party, the People's Party for Freedom and Democracy, VVD, which again won the last election, is relatively conservative, right? And they're very interested in doing business with China. And we've yet to see with now a bigger second party, which is a bit more progressive and liberal. Hopefully the new coalition will be a bit stronger in the stance of against China. And as a side note, that this second largest party, D66, one of the member of that, it's George Sorsma, who is actually a parliament member who is in the China sanction list in retaliation of EU sanctions. So hopefully there's more going to happen in the coming years.
Now, Simona, I don't know if you'd agree with me in that Sweden, it's changing. I think people in general have a largely negative perception already of the Chinese government, but the government, or at least members of parliament, they don't seem to fully appreciate the threat. Would you agree?
Absolutely, and I think there is a big change because many people like you have been taking the time to actually like throw it into their heads that there is something wrong about the approach that we have been having, but also that we have a Chinese ambassador that makes our job very much easier because he is a bit, I don't know if I want to say crazy, but he goes outside of the box to show the suppression of what China is doing, but also by using it on our own journalists. He's trying to silence them. I know many people like you and politicians have gotten long emails of how they are liars and spreading fake news. So I think he's making our lives a bit easier of being outside of the box.
Absolutely. Then what are your thoughts on the perception so far, and how every country has taken an approach?
You mean the government, or?
Yes. Exactly.
Wow, this is a big question. There's so many countries. So, well, maybe perhaps we could try to talk or focus on the EU level.
Yeah.
So for the EU level, we have seen that the CAI, the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, the China deal, has been temporarily frozen. But there has been some analysis or maybe analysis or opinion that the CAI could be unfrozen anytime, maybe even in October, because the CCP, they may try to withdraw the sanction in exchange of such diplomatic victory with the enactment of the agreement of the CAI. So this is one of the things that I'm quite worrying about, and I have been trying to approach different MEP or different MPs in different parliament to stop the CAI from being unfrozen. Perhaps we should pursue the cancellation of the whole treaty, not just suspension, or not just suspension or freezing the negotiation or liaison. Yeah, so this is the situation in Europe. And I just realized it seems that I never talk about the UK situation. In the UK, the situation is much better when compared to Denmark or Norway, Netherlands, or Sweden, because as you could see from the London rally for Hong Kong, we got cross-party support from the Conservative Party, the former leader of Conservative Party. We also got the shadow ministers for the Asia and Pacific in the rally. We also got the support from the Liberal Democrat in that rally, although the Liberal Democrat MP could not attend because of a minor accident, concussion, these sorts of things. But we do got cross-party support. And I think, although it's slightly maybe off topic, but we have to pay attention to the Uyghur genocide issue, because in many countries, including the Netherlands, Canada, US, UK, and the latest one, Czech Republic. All of these countries have declared that the parliaments have declared that there has been Uyghurs genocide in China. So we could see that, or we could foresee that more and more countries will adopt a more tough China policy in the future. This change will be starting or initiated by the parliament, and then we could gradually bring the change to the government itself in different countries. So I am quite optimistic regarding the China policy.
Now, Sweden has been quite vocal about certain issues, such as, and we have to talk about this, of course, because it's been such a huge part of the movement, the national security law in Hong Kong and the continued erosion of democratic rights and freedom. So Sweden, it shut down all the Confucius Institutes, and recently I think it ended legal aid agreements with Hong Kong. They're all significant actions, though personally I feel it can afford to do more. Now, what concrete actions would you like to see from your countries? Simona, let's start it with Sweden.
It's good that we start with Sweden. Yeah, a lot can be done, but I think it's two parts. The first one is power, and the other one is people. When it comes to power, as Netherlands talked about, there are going to be a lot of changes in who's going to be sitting in our parliaments and maybe even in our governments. And I think that is a perfect opportunity to get hungry MPs and push them to push these issues, but also get these issues on the dock into elections, like in Norway. I think definitely that the China issue could be something that the parties need to take a stand on and that people will vote on. And the other part is people, and I think there we need to make it easier maybe for people to make good choices. It should be easier to boycott Chinese companies maybe, or show support. And there we could be inspired of what is going on in Hong Kong with the yellow shops, or having apps that tells you this is a good or bad shop to go to. And I think maybe we could do something like that in the European countries to make it easier as a person that is woke and wants to do something, to make it easier for them to do that. So I think we need to push for on people and on power at the same time. And I'm an optimist, so I think it's not hard to get this turned around and to get more countries to actually, as Finn is saying, taking a stand on genocide, taking a stand for Hong Kongers, and taking a stand for their own countries to be resilient against the Chinese threat. Thanks.
And how about you, Jessica?
Yeah, I think in general for Norway, we have to inform more about the situation to the general public. And I see personally that more actions have to be taken for the situations for the Uyghurs and also in Tibet. And I believe if there's changes in more regions in China in the human rights situation, the situation for Hong Kong will be better. And we support a diplomatic boycott for the Winter Olympics in Beijing 2022. So I hope there will be international action regarding this. In addition to this, I hope there will be more assistance for immigrants from Hong Kong who are leaving Hong Kong in other countries. And as we have the webinar now, and I think collaborations across countries are very nice. And also less economic dependency on China, as Simona has mentioned, to try to diversify trade or investment, not be so dependent on China, but maybe think of other alternatives such as Taiwan, Japan, or Australia. One thing that we have been working on is the ongoing negotiation for the free trade agreement between China and Norway. And seeing the CAI has been temporarily suspended, it's a sign for Norwegian government to take a step back to reconsider where it's worth to have it going on. And the last thing I want to mention is in the past year, because of the pandemic, the Hong Kong protest has been like cooled down, and there has been less media attention regarding the Hong Kong protest. But there are still reports when there are mass arrestation, and we find it normally the media would report about like Jimmy Lai, who is a press figure in Hong Kong. And so we will have to see when the pandemic is over, what would be the actions in Hong Kong. And we'll try to coordinate with people in Hong Kong and to make a stronger front within it to fight for the battle in Hong Kong internationally.
Dawn, what are the concrete actions you'd like to see Denmark take?
I think, yeah, I completely agree with what Jessica has suggested already. And I think there are a few things that I would like to add on to what she's already mentioned. I think, yeah, to continue, like, it's really important for the Danish people or the society to understand that China is a power that aims to wipe out culture and identity. So what we see happening already in Tibet and for the Uyghurs, like, this is not just, it's so much more than human rights. It's also about culture and identity. It's about China trying to dissolve cultures and identities. And so I think one thing that I for the Hong Kongers, I think on a maybe on an academia level or professional level, like preserving Cantonese is something that maybe not many people have mentioned before or thought about before. But for example, there are universities in the US that are trying to cut out Cantonese classes. For example, in China studies, they would only study Mandarin, but not Cantonese, for example. But for example, like Cantonese is also a language. So I think to understand that Hong Kongers, we have a unique culture. There's a uniqueness to how we live. That's a very important element to what we are striving for. We want to preserve how we live, how we want to preserve our culture. And I think, yeah, it would mean a lot if people around the world could get to know about Hong Kong and our culture and keep it alive, even when a lot of people in the city are being silenced.
The Netherlands?
Yeah, well, I think most of the things have been mentioned. That we're of course, as Finn was saying, that we're really happy that the Dutch Parliament already recognized that the Uyghur situation is a genocide, and that the EU sanction list started on Chinese official in Xinjiang. And what we do hope in the power level is that that should also start to extend this sanction to people who have started violating human rights in Hong Kong, for example, Chinese officials and Hong Kong officials who have basically taken down one country to a system and the freedom, introducing, for example, a national security law. And what we have not seen too much again from Netherlands is, for example, the lifeboat scheme mentioned by Jessica, like to help people who can people to immigrate and so on into the Netherlands. The yellow shop idea is really great. What we have also tried to do, and that there are some shop owners here who, for example, was openly supporting national security law and posting things, and those are things that might be nice to actually make people aware that there are certain things that that are kind of related to each other, and what has been very, I think, also successful in the community that I've seen is, for example, the Xinjiang cotton matter, where a lot of big companies also are starting to aware of that where the source material coming from that could involve human rights violations, and the consumers also are very interested in knowing that their products that they buy are has a certain quality and does not in buying such products actually support actions that are actually violating human rights. And I think, yeah, more of these awareness building is, I think, what I think hope for, and also media attention for sure is something that is really nice to see.
Now, Finn, I'm not going to ask you about all of every single country again, but in the UK, I know you've mentioned quite a few that the UK has done quite a bit, but are there more concrete actions that you would like to see?
First of all, Hong Kongers are grateful for the introduction of the BNO visa scheme. But as Sir Ian Duncan Smith MP and Stephen Kinnock MP have said in the rally, more things are yet to be done. So, for example, we do need a Magnitsky-style sanction on individuals. For example, Carrie Lam and other people who oppress the Hong Kongers and violating human rights. This is the first thing. And the second thing is that we do need much more than individual sanction, just like economic sanction, because this is the only way out to drain the financial resources of the CCP. And this is the only way out that we could lead to the collapse of the CCP, just like what the USSR had faced in the 1990s and 80s. So the last thing is that perhaps we should take advantage or utilize the opportunity of the G7 summit. I highly encourage the G7 to consider expanding to the D10 League for those to incorporate different democratic countries like India, Japan, and other countries. Or even we should consider the concept of D10+1. The one means Taiwan. So this is the way or the things that all the democratic countries should think about. And perhaps in the future, we should have a league of democracy, not just those 10 countries, 11 countries. We should incorporate or include those countries like Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, and more. So I hope this could come true. And after that, Hong Kong may be free.
Now, I know we're getting on a bit, partly because of the technical issues and the delay. Sorry again. So one final question I'd like to ask everyone before I let you all go. What were your biggest takeaways from your different events from around the world this past June 12th? Now, Simona, let's start with you.
It's good that you always give the other ones time to think. I would say that it doesn't take a lot, like it doesn't need to be perfect always. I think that sometimes we fall on our own perfection. It's better to do something than not to do anything. We had an exhibition that we called Made in China outside of the embassy and consulate here in Gothenburg, and it made a lot of it was very little effort, but it made a lot of people stop and reading about the genocide, about Hong Kong, about the things that China is doing, both in China and abroad. And it didn't take so much from us, but it was, I would say it was part of making the people know and engage. So it takes a little and not so much perfection, I would say. That is something that I take with me, because many times we fall on that everything needs to be perfect. And I would like to thank you for making this seminar. Really, it was nice to be a part of it.
Thank you for joining. And Finn, your biggest takeaway from that quite sizable rally in the UK?
In the UK, well, my London rally was, there were so many turning points or obstacles. I need to change the marching route and the location with 2 to 3 days left right before the rally. So I have to undo and redo everything within three days. So it was a gigantic headache to me. But after that, I just realized the importance of the water and persistence. And thanks to the sudden ad hoc change of location, in the end, we marched on the most busy street in the UK. And this is sometimes it may be it may look back in the very beginning, we don't like changes, we don't like some accident, but in the end, the result may be even better if we could cope with such ad hoc changes or issue. So yeah, so the biggest takeaway, I think that the two biggest takeaway are be water and persistence.
And Jessica, how was it in Norway?
Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank initiative from other groups and also Finn of trying to collaborate with different groups. It's really motivating that in terms of a small organization as such, that we don't feel alone organizing events. But join a global rally is a very motivating thing. One important takeaway of speaking is that we have gotten the role of telling what cannot be told in Hong Kong. The event that we organized was a documentary screening event, and just a day before, the authorities in Hong Kong has ordered a film censorship on because of the national security law. And we think that it's very important that we keep doing more of this to tell the general public about movies or documentaries or like truths that cannot be told in Hong Kong anymore.
And Dawn.
Yes. So yeah, we also had a documentary screening session from a Japanese team, and we also had a call with the Japanese producer at the end of the conference, and a few of us from Hong Kong, we made some snacks, like local snacks, to share with the participants that came to the event. And for us, I think the biggest takeaway is to believe that people want to support us. Yeah, they want to hear the stories. They are inspired by the movement. They're inspired by people who are fighting for freedom. So I think the biggest takeaway is just to not give up and keep going, and just believe in the good that we are doing and we are all fighting for. So yeah, thank you so much all for even today, for this week, for what you've been doing and you have in mind to do. Yeah, let's keep going.
Thank you for joining. And the Netherlands?
Yeah, well, so I would echo Jessica that I would like to thank everybody who has organized things, and also Finn, who have established this platform for a global collaboration as well. That that it's really motivating both for us and for people who attend. And so it was actually one of the greatest turnout since 28th of September 2019, when again a big global action was happening, and we got support from the Tibetans and Uyghurs and Amnesty International, and one supporter even brought a artistic Miffy, so this cartoon character, in prison to represent the detainee in Hong Kong. And I would say one of the biggest takeaways is also that we should be don't forget to show our support to people who are still fighting in Hong Kong. And during the rally that we organized in Amsterdam, we collected letters that actually are addressed to activists and Democrats that are detained currently in Hong Kong, and to hopefully show our support. And I think that's something, in the end, I think it's what we really want to do, is to garner support from everywhere in the world and show that we are still here, we should still fight on.
Right. And I think that is a beautiful place to finish this. Does anyone have any final comments they'd like to leave anyone with? No. Then I thank you all really from the bottom of my heart for joining us and for doing your part in this giant movement, for keeping it going, for making sure that its meaning isn't lost. And I hope we can all sort of meet together again. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.